Okay, so the process here that I take once ZBrush fully loads, there we are. I'm going to start with a sphere, something like this. Also, keep in mind, I'm using my mouse here, not a tablet, and so this is not going to be super fantastic, but I'll do my best. I'm going to switch to my move tool here, and the first thing that I want to do is just make this sphere less spherical. And so I'm just going to kind of like push it in from different directions, kind of thing, making sure that for every angle that I kind of look at this thing from, I don't see it as being straight, but kind of this weird blobby shape, kind of like this. I could also, if I wanted to, go and put some noise on this. So for instance, if I go to geometry here, I'll go and ZRemesh this. I'll do this from the start. This will actually make things quite a bit easier. So I'm going to bring my polygon down here to 0.5, which is essentially 500 polys, which is a really ridiculously simple shape like this. It's more than 500 polys. This is 400 vertices, so the polygon count's a little bit higher than that. But what this will do is it's going to give me this kind of really neat oblong shape here. This kind of spheroid without actually being sphere. And one of the things that I could do, I could try and use noise on this to, again, kind of warp it a little bit. So if I go to surface and noise, and I increase the strength of the noise, no, I guess I can't do that. It doesn't work exactly the way I was hoping it would. I was hoping it would actually just move around the vertices, which does not seem to be the way. So we'll just cancel that. What's that? No, so deformation is going to, I don't think there's a noise in here. Oh, there is a noise in here. Look at that. Okay, there we go. Ta-da, noise. Okay, this probably still didn't do exactly what I wanted to, but what I'm going to do is start subdividing this. It did give me a little bit of a lumpy surface here. I'm going to get this to somewhere over 2 million polys. I'm at 6.5. That'll probably do. Normally at this stage, I'll go in with trim dynamic. And I'll go in and like flatten a bunch of this stuff off. This kind of gives it that chipped off of a larger rock kind of look. And so what I've got here essentially kind of looks more chiseled than, polished by water or eroded, as it were. Something like this. And again, like I'm not being very careful about how I'm doing this. I'm really just kind of randomly and sporadically going and pasting these things in here. And again, this is why that noise that I use in deformation wasn't, all that much ideal, because this has essentially gone and undone that. And so something like that is going to look okay. This is giving it a little bit more of a chipped kind of look instead of being perfectly smooth and eroded. So something like that is going to work correctly. I'm going to open up a new Google Chrome here. And I'm going to go look for an image of stone. What I want to find is something that is an image somewhat like this, where it's one solid looking image of stone. There isn't too much lighting information in the image. I'm not seeing really harsh shadows or highlights. I'm not going to use this one only because this is the one that exists in the other rocks. And so what I'll do is I'll just grab one of the other ones here. This one's got those little mossy bits. That's kind of neat. This one, 1600 by, this is a really nice high resolution one. The problem with this is that I don't see this as reading as rock, even though that's what it is. It kind of just looks like multicolored noise to me. And I like this one, this very clearly is rock. And that's what I'm looking for, is I want something that absolutely reads as being the texture of rock. That's got kind of these little peaks and valleys and things in it without it being, overly so. I also want to avoid here in going in and grabbing these, grabbing somebody's texture, because that too will kind of become a little bit more evident. Okay, that one's not bad. It's a different color than the one that I've got already. So I'm going to go to save this, and I'll save it here as stone. There we go. I want to make sure there's no watermarks or any information on this, which there appears to not be. I'm going to switch over to my standard brush, and I'll go and import that as a not an alpha, as a texture. So import RCC and stone. I'll go make sure that I select it. And I'll use, in terms of the stroke, the drag rectangle. And what I want to do here is not that. I'll turn off the Z add and I'll turn on the RGB. And this is going to allow me to essentially just stamp this on the rock. Now, in terms of the blurriness of this here, that you can see, I need to make sure that I am high enough poly and that I don't drag this thing too far. Now, see that hard edge I'm getting here? That too is going to be a bad thing. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring back that focal shift a little bit. And under alpha modify, I'm going to increase the radial fade a little bit. And what this should do, what it's not doing, okay, maybe we'll just use an alpha. Let's go and use something with a softer, there we go. Let's get rid of that radial fade now. There we go. I just want that hard edge gone because that'll make it a little bit more apparent that this is just the same image over and over and over again. And so I'll go and kind of, slap this on. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm trying to make sure, sometimes I drag down, sometimes I drag up, sometimes I drag right, sometimes I go left. Sometimes I'm dragging a lot, sometimes I'm dragging a little. I want to do that kind of variance. And you can see that this image has got a very clear little belly button looking shape here that is kind of problematic because we see it repeating all over the place, but it may not actually become an issue once I get into the nitty gritty of this. All right. So again, I want to make sure that I'm covering look, the little tiny one right there. I want to make sure that I'm covering all of the surface of this thing and not leaving too much of this empty white out here. The white is going to really be an indication that this thing isn't fully poly painted. You can double check this by using the flat shader. The flat shader doesn't have any shading on it. It's just solid white. And as such, I'll be able to see where that white exists and be able to cover it a little bit easier. I can see a little bit exists there and there. Okay, for the most part, I've got a rock. I'll go back to my basic material here. Now, the detail that exists on this thing is currently there from my sculpting, but you can see that it's still like a really smooth boulder. Even though I went and give it all this faceting and everything like that, it still very much reads as being something that was eroded and rounded and whatnot. And so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to actually use the texture stuff that I've put on here to generate a little bit more detail. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go into my masking, and I'm going to mask by color and intensity. I'm going to turn off the view mask so you can see what this does, and I'm going to turn off my poly paint as well so you can see what this does. Under deformation, I'm now going to go to inflate, and I'll type, 5. See that? So the mask is picking up the detail from the boulder, from the image that's there. And as I inflate it, the mask is holding back the darker recesses of this thing, and only the light spots are able to come out. I'm going to undo that, and I'll increase it this time a little bit more. I'm going to inflate with, that was 5. I'll double it up and put 10 on. Cool. Now, I'm also trying to remember here while I'm doing this that, there are these tiny little peaks spitting out on this thing. There's all this tiny little information on here. And while that doesn't look good right now on this boulder, all that information is going to exist as a normal map. And that normal map won't actually look as peaked and as jagged as this. So it'll actually work out quite nicely. I'm going to go put something a little bit more shiny on here. Boulders are generally a little bit shinier than this. Just to kind of get an idea as to what it should look like here once we get it into Unreal. Yeah, it looks all right. The other thing that I want to do with this is to generate some cracks and some more unique details. So again, it's one texture that's kind of all over the place on here. I'm going to clear the mask. And so what I want to do, I'm going to go again back to Google here, and I'm going to go look for cracks, and we'll go take a look at some kind of cracking information. So stuff like this, which would look really, really good on that boulder, is kind of really neat information. However, it's also going to take it a little bit further away from stone. It won't look quite so much like stone if it's broken like this. So what I'm going to do instead of cracks is, ooh, look at that one. That's really nice. Look at these guys. But again, this is going to kind of get it away from looking like stone, and it is going to look like dry dirt. And the last thing I want is this to look like a giant ball of dried dirt. And so instead of cracks, what I'm going to look for is going to be scratches. Scratches. So what I'm looking for here is something that looks fairly organic, something that is not containing a watermark, but something that's kind of, a little bit pitted, something that looks a little bit like concrete, but also contains like some lines. I want to stay away from very specific to metal types of scratches. So things like this here, where they're all perfectly vertical, is no good. That's not going to work at all. Same with things like this. Like this is way too even and uniform. That's not going to look like a boulder. I want more of that kind of random element. I want something that is organic and, kind of distributed in a much more even way. The problem is that most of these things are really watermarked. I could go into Substance and generate one of these things fairly quickly. The idea is that it would ideally be faster to find something online that is organic and whatnot. Ooh, that's nice. Done. Okay, I'm going to copy this image and go into Photoshop. Get rid of this. And I'll open a new, which we'll use the clipboard and paste this in. First things first, because I'm going to be using this in ZBrush, I want it on a black background and not a white background, and I want the scratches themselves to be white. I'm going to adjust the levels here and increase where that black level is so that you can see my scratches are getting a lot more sporadic and uneven. I'm going to go to the image here, and I'm going to take this image and I'm going to squash it down or stretch. I don't want to stretch it out. That would be bad. I'll bring it down to 512. Let's make this uniform. 512 by 512, like so. So it is nice and square. The other thing I want to do is I want to paint out a little bit on the perimeter here, any of the scratches that are kind of hitting the surface. And so the idea is to kind of just go in and kind of splotch these out. I'm just using a very uneven brush here. As long as there's no white pixels on the border, that's all I really care about. The middle stuff doesn't matter. So I'll go and save this in the same place. I'll just call this Scratches Medium. I usually get light and heavy versions of this as well, so I can kind of do the back and forth. So I'll go back into Substance here. And on my rock here, I'll go in with my alpha and import that same image, school RCC, and where did you go? Scratches Medium. I'll get rid of the rock texture. We don't need that anymore. I'm going to keep RGB on. What I'm going to first do is grab a color from the rock, and then I'm just going to go and darken it quite a bit. I don't want to quite hit black, because it tends to kill textures a lot. So you can say like really, really dark brown here is going to work. In fact, I can probably pull that even warmer, something like that. I'm going to turn on Z sub, and when I click and drag now, it's going to put some scratches on this thing and actually paint them at the same time. So the idea is to now go and disfigure the rock a little bit with some of these scratches. And again, I can make them small, I can make them big, I can pull them all in different directions, I can put them over top of each other. This is all just going to lead to a really nice normal map. Something like that. Cool. That's starting to look all scratched up. And again, they're actually quite a bit deeper than I would really want them if, I was displacing this rock. But the size that they are will actually help the normal map out quite a bit. So I'm going to go and we'll turn that off so I don't accidentally do this again. I'll turn off this. I'll just put this back just to reset my standard brush here back again. Now I need to generate some textures to this. So first things first, I'm going to go to my geometry down to my lowest subdivision level, and I'm going to go to Z plugins, UV master, and I'll just unwrap this guy. Then I'll go down to my normal map, and I'll flip the green channel and create a normal map. Again, flipping the normal map, flipping the green channel here is because the UVs are inverted in ZBrush. So now if I clone this and I go to textures and I flip it upside down, that unflips that green channel, so it's now the right way. Now I can export this, and this will be stones, normals. I'll go and create a, let's do the OBJ here while I'm here. So I'm going to export this as stones mesh. Okay, now I'll go to the highest subdivision level, and then I'll go to texture map, and again I'm going to create new from polypaint. Yes, clone that texture. Again, I'm going to flip it and export it, and this is going to be color map. All right, so back into the world of Unreal here. I'll just import these into here. So I'm going to go and actually, yeah, I'll do it in here. Okay, so import. Where is it? Stone mesh, stone normals, color, and open. Do you want to? No. Okay, import. Yeah, warning. Again, my stones are pretty small. ZBrush for the win. ZBrush scale here is incredibly tiny. So I'm just going to go and import the stone mesh like that. I'll just increase it to 100 on import. Yeah. Nice big. And then I'll just re-export it again. Hey, look, there is a use for Max. Max is now a file converter. Okay, back into the world of Unreal. And I'll just go and re-import this guy. And we should get much bigger stones. The material here that I've put together, that's a rock. The material that I've put together, material, I should have named it material. So what's really simply going on here, you can see that this is essentially the same EVs as what I just did. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make an instance of this thing. I'm going to convert this to a parameter, and this is going to be base color. I'll leave the sand that's on top as the same texture here, and I'll just go and tweak the normals. So this guy, convert to parameter, and this is going to be stone. No, I don't need stone. I just need normals. Okay, normals. Yeah, I'll save that. Okay, so now if I take my rock material here, which I should probably rename rock material like so. My rock came in. What did not come in were my textures. And so I'm going to go re-import those again. This time giving them names that are better. Stone normals and color. Actually, that should have been fine. Color. Sorry, I just want to double check. What are you? Base color. Yeah, this is why naming conventions are really important. So stone color and normals. Okay, no, everything should be good. So I'm going to take my rock material. I'll create an instance. I'll call it rock instance 1. Yeah, that's what I thought, but the actual texture was called base color on the other one, which doesn't appear to be in this folder. It's elsewhere. So what I'll do here, that wasn't good. Yeah, well, we'll figure it out. We'll see. I might have to re-import it. The UVs in these things look the same, so that is the same color that's there. Yeah, so something's gone horrendously wrong. Let me make sure that these guys are still unwrapped and still look good. They still look okay. Okay, so let me import. I'm going to rename these things so that it makes a little bit more sense. So stone normals, cancel, is right there, stone normals. So that one's good. Import, the guy named color is the one that I already have. Okay. Naming convention for the win. And go in here, school RCC, and open up color. Okay, and I'm going to open up the normals that goes along with it, stone normals. Yeah, so these are one and the same. So that is not the texture that's on these rocks. If I go and grab one of these rocks, and I don't need the rock, I just need the material. Rocks material. And I go find base color, which is using something using color. Re-import. Let's go name this color 2. Okay, import. It is different. Huzzah. Okay. Naming conventions. I purposely did this wrong to teach you a lesson. Okay, I'm going to go sub these guys in like that. Rock normals, which is stone normals, like that. Looks good. I'll just save that and close this. And the new rock that came in is this guy, and I'll grab the instance material and slap it on here. And now I should be able to just grab that new rock instance. What was he called? Stone Mesh. And put him here amongst his buddies. And just like that, whoa, easy now. You get a little bit more of the same thing. Probably want to bury that one a little bit to make it look like it's actually able to support its own weight. Now, the way that I made this cluster here was a little bit different. Placing a ton of boulders in Unreal, scattering them can be a little time consuming, and you probably want to give yourself a little bit more freedom in creating and speed in creating this stuff. And so one of the things that I did was this. I'm back in the world of Max here. And I'm first going to take this guy and I'm going to scale him down a little bit. He's a huge boulder now. So let's go 25% of what? 20 what? Number lock. 25%. And again, I'll reset the X form to accept that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a plane here that is about the size of where I want the spread of these things to go. I'll turn off my grid. And what I'm going to do, I'll turn off the realistic here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the boulder, and I'm going to go into painting mode here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint with objects in list. I'm going to do, here we go, add this guy, add selected. So now my stone mesh is in here. I'm going to make sure that I'm painting with objects in list. I'm going to change my scale to be a random scale between 20% and 200% of the size of this rock. My rotations, I'll set them to random. Like that. So now they'll randomly be rotated in different directions. And then the spacing here is set to 4. That's going to be really huge. I'm going to pull that down a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and paint a little circle here. Now, that 4 was huge. In fact, the 2 is huge. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. I'm decreasing the spacing, and Max is just, yeah. It's like an earthworm growing. Now, let me go type 4 in here to try and set that back. There we go. So I'm going to increase the spacing to space them out a little bit. All right, something, I guess, a little bit like that, maybe even a little bit more. Now I want to look at what's going on with the scale here and how uniformly or ununiformly scaled they are. And then I'll hit the little X, and then I can actually now go and paint in a little patch of these rocks. I'll grab the initial plane and delete it. I'll convert these all to editable poly since they're all actually instances right now. And then I'll reset their X forms. I'll select the entirety of this thing. Actually, I have to attach them together. I'm going to grab one in the middle, and I'll attach them all together. If I don't attach them together, what's going to happen is that they're each going to end up with their own material ID when you bring them into Unreal, which is going to be a pain in the butt. So I'll attach them together so it's now one mesh. And I'll call this stone cluster large. And I'll just go and export this. So file, export selected. And I'll call this stone cluster large, like so, and export, and done. Now the really nice thing about this is that when I come back into Unreal here, all I really need to do is import the stone cluster, like so. Import. It's a large mesh, a lot of rocks in there. So you can see this is the earlier one here, rock cluster. So there's stone cluster. I'm going to open that up, and I will go and assign the instanced material to it. So rock instance material. Now these guys all have the sand as well. I should maybe go and delete that cluster. And I'll just re-export it as an FBX so my rotation is right. I could. Stone. It is. But I try not to change things that I might have forgotten that I've changed. Because then I assume it's right all the time. And that can cause problems. So stone cluster large. If I just use FBX, it'll be okay. And the FBX exporter is actually just rotating it on its own as it comes out. So I can go back here, and then I'll import that again. So stone cluster large. Here, I'm going to tell it don't bother generating collision. Auto-generate collision. There we go. Yeah, that's fine. Import, there's no UCX on this, and so it won't generate collision anyway. So I'll go in here, and again, I'll grab the rock instance material and slap it on here. Like that. There's now a cluster of these boulders. So if I close this and grab my cluster and bring it out here, just like that, I'm again able to put a ton of these little guys all over the place. Now this would probably look really good too. I'm going to make another material here. Sand floor. And I'm just going to go and actually make this sand floor material. I'm going to have to grab somebody's texture from online because I don't have the one that I need. But I'm going to go grab this. Put this into my roughness here. I don't want the sand to be shiny. I'll grab a coordinate here, and I'll tile this 25 times. Sand. Ooh, sand. Okay. So what I'm going to grab here, I'm going to look for sand normal map. And what I'm looking for is not like the little grains of sand like I have, but it's actually like the ripples and waves that I want. Like that. That's beautiful. So I'm going to save this. Again, don't use people's textures from the internet. Whoever Luke is, rather not have this as a JPEG. Whatever, I'll save it as a JPEG. All right, and then I'll just bring that into Unreal here. Unreal. Import Luke's texture. Whoever Luke is, thank you. Bring this in here. Oops. And I'm going to blend. Hey, come on now. I'm going to blend these together. Normals. Norm. normals. There we go. Corrected normals. So my main texture is this, and this is my additional texture, and I'll plug this in here. And what I want to do now is actually set the tiling on this thing so that it looks more like sand. However, I don't know what the tiling on this thing is going to be yet until I go and put this in the sand floor. So I'll put it on the ground here, and we should actually get these rocks looking like they're actually part of this thing. Let's get rid of this and get rid of this. The shadows are still there. I'll have to bake the lighting. So it looks like I could tile it a few more times. If I go into that sand floor and grab a coordinate, plug it in here, and I don't know, 5. There we go. Go build my lighting. This shouldn't take long because there's not really a lot of complexity going on here. But I just want to see it without these shadows from the planes that are gone. See how these rocks actually interface with the ground. So the other thing I could do, well, yeah, it's I guess in UV channel 2 or something. My UV should be perfect because they're from ZBrush. Yeah, so the overlapping UVs is on the chunks of rock, the clusters. Because the clusters are all using the same texture. They all have exactly the same UVs. For whatever reason, it did not do that on these ones. And so apparently I've done something really different with these. Let me go and take a look at those meshes. So that was the stone cluster. And if I go look at the UVs here, channel, I did not create a new UV channel for the new one. Interesting. So is there a setting here where I can do this? No, that's collision. No. Odd that it did not create a new light map for these things. Let me try and import it again. Yeah, I'll overwrite it. Auto-generate collision. Generate light map UVs. Oh, yeah, maybe I turned that off by accident last time. So if I build the lighting again, we should not get that error now. So yeah, I might have accidentally turned that off first go round, which would have screwed it up. And so, yeah, now I've got, eventually when this guy finishes, there we go. Oh, still overlapping UVs. Let's see what these things look like. It does have a good light map channel now. Unless it's complaining about UV map number 1. Oh, my texture's not on there anymore. There. Yeah, so they work fine. So yeah, if I just go and play this now. There's no collision on these things, obviously. But you can see, like, it was fairly short amount of time to... Well, that one doesn't look right. Fairly short amount of time to get these guys up and in here. These are the ones I did earlier, and I generated a collision for them. But yeah, and, you know, it's got the dust on top of it, the amount of sand collecting on top. I can even blend that normal map onto the sand on top, so that not only is there sand on top of it, but you can just start getting the ripples of the normal map to appear as well. And so, yeah, I mean, when you look at the normals of these things, you can see that slight faceting on them, right? So they're not perfectly smooth. You do see some of that angle coming in. I'm a rock. Anyway, that's the process for that. Again, it's kind of the exact same thing for doing not boulder type rocks, but like large square rocks and volumes of rocks that way as well. It's a fairly uniform process. It's just the initial starting shape that you have varies, right? And so where I made my boulders, incredibly round, you could go in and do them with, more squares and jaggeds and things like that. Which I'm hoping will help. There's your generator, Mark. No collision on there. But anyway, yeah, you can see it's pretty quick to get these kind of things out and placed around. And they look pretty solid. It may be worth LODing them because they are pretty high poly for what they are. If I go look at the wireframe here, there's a pretty dense amount of polygons here. And so it may be worth making an LOD for these things, not only these ones, but the other ones as well. So for instance, if you wanted to make an LOD for these things, you could just go use the Pro Optimizer. And with the Pro Optimizer, you essentially just tell it the percentage that you want. So for instance, I want this to be 20%. And it reduces it down 20%. Or say, 5%. And there's a 5% version of these things. So if I convert this to an editable poly and export selected as stone cluster, and I'll call this LOD2, like that. Yeah. Unreal doesn't use the numbers. They're just for my purposes. Yeah. I'll go to the lit mode of this thing again, and I'll get out of here, and I'll go and grab the stone cluster, which is here. And what I want to do is, where is this now? LOD group, base LOD, import LOD level 1, which is this guy. There we go. Now there's a second LOD here. The UVs on this thing have probably changed. I'm going to see what it looks like with the same material. Not good. Yeah. The idea is that they should actually look a lot better than that. When we look at the UVs, oh yeah, they're just garbage. So what I'll do here is undo that and Pro Optimizer. I'll actually just delete it, and I'll clone these guys as a new copy, and I'll call it here LOD1 like this. And then I'll put the Pro Optimizer on the clone. Pro Optimizer. I'll calculate this, and I'll set it back down to 5%. So you can see, they're really low poly versions of this. But what this is going to allow me to do, if I convert this to editable poly, I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to put a projection modifier on it. And I'm going to project its UVs onto the other one. I'll just grab the cage here and reset it a moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go pick this guy. So there's the low poly one, LOD1, that's in there. I'm going to go and projection down here. I'm going to project map. I'm going to add projection map 1, like so. And I want to project, that should be good. Same as source, target channel, source channel, like that. So if I say project, like that, and then I go grab the other mesh, see the projection that's there? If I go put a UV map on top of this, it's perfect. It's close enough. It wasn't able, there's not edges, obviously, in the right areas. But what I should be able to do is just kind of move these guys around. Yeah, just tuck that back in. You go back in here. It's fine. It's fine. So I'm going to convert this to a double poly. Again, it's not going to be beautiful. Let's do this. And back into the world of Unreal here. I'll go back. That's the material. I'll go back into the stone cluster. And LOD1. I need to that's the material. Base LOD. Where are you? Re-import LOD level 1. This guy. Again, I'll put that same material on it. The instance. And I'll close that. As you can see, like, it actually does a better job. It's not perfect, but it's better. And what's really neat is I can actually set the distance at which this happens. So from over here, like, they look identical, right? And it's when you get up close that you actually see the high-res ones. So the idea is to make that pop happen when it's not visible. The way you would do that is actually go into the LOD settings and then go and play with when that happens. So you can see the LOD in here too. There's one of those ugly UV spots. And so, yeah, so what I would go do is change the distance here. So I probably still want the high poly ones here. No. Let's set this back to 1. I thought that was the slide. That's fine. Building settings. That's fine. I could have sworn that was it. So this guy here affects which LOD you see permanently. This is the lowest LOD, or the highest level of subdivision. So if I make this guy 0, we see the highest ones. If I make it 1, we only see the lowest ones. And you can import more than one, right? So I can make it was at 5%, right? And so I can do one at 20 and one at 5, and they pop and pop and pop. So for instance, if you look at the triangle count, I'm up close right now. I'm at 54,000. And when they pop, I'm at 2,000. And so it's a really big difference. And again, the cleaner you get your normals, obviously, the better it's going to get, right? You don't get any of this ugly stuff, or not your normals, but your UVs. I could have sworn there was a setting in here. It might not be on there, but it might be on this. If I select my mesh, and I go to the details pane here. Oh, it popped off again. Back. The LOD popping might be here. Let's see. No. Wait, what? 1, 2, 3. Sure. Physics, no. Collision, no. Lighting, no. Render, no. Yeah. I don't see it in here either. Anyway, there's somewhere is a setting that determines when that pop happens. And the idea is to make it pop when you're far enough away that you don't see the pop happen. But yeah, so that would be worth doing it for all of these things. LODing them down, LODing them down, LODing them down. You're going to get a much better performance hit. Now, with you guys doing the contest, don't do LODs. No. Make it look beautiful and story. That's what's really going to matter. And so, I mean, ideally, like, that pop happening here is good. It's just not happening at the right level. So it should happen about here, I would say, is when that pop should happen. And then as I get closer, we shouldn't see anything change. What's that? Yeah, and you actually just see the pop happen. I've seen a few games that do it with a sniper scope. The LED doesn't happen. It still reads you as being far away. Yes. And you zoom in and you see this like really distorted character running around. You're like, what is that? It's like a cube and a ball, and you're like, oh. Yeah. Yeah, it's a box that texture's on. Anyway, that's that rock method. Again, like the initial base rock that I made is probably too large to be doing clusters with. You probably do want to do a lot lower resolution version of these. So when you're doing the painting, you could actually set it to paint with so you can have a bunch of different rocks. Oh, and it would scatter them around. Absolutely. And so that was kind of what I did when I did the ones earlier this morning. These aren't actually all the same rock. I've actually got, you can see rock 2, rock 3, rock 4. Rock 4 was the one that was broken and in pieces. And so, yeah, you can actually just like go and manipulate them and get different variations of the same thing, which, read pretty well. This, is reading to me like being rock, I think. Again, it helps to have that sand color. Like it's the exact same texture that's on the ground, right? That's sitting on top of these guys. So it really does make them feel like they are part of that environment, that they're actually there covered in the same sand that's in the rest of the place. Now, that little trick that we did to make the rocks have the sand on top, just taking that normal and using the world space here. So this guy here. This here, you can use this on a tremendous amount of your meshes, right? You could put that sand on top of everything in your world. The idea is to make sure when you're doing this that, again, if we go look at the preview of this, right, we're just getting a gradient on top of here. It's really playing around with just how subtle this thing is. A very small amount like this is still going to read. We could probably even, if I bring this back here, throw a power node in here. Replace that. And you can see I can actually even darken it a little bit further with the power node. So I put a 3 in here. That is subtle. Let's put a 1 back here. And then, so here's what the power node does. As I increase this, not so much. Bring this down to 0.5. Bring this back down to 1. So there's 0.5. And as I increase this guy, that starts darkening and darkening and darkening. And so it's really giving you there's a very small amount of sand on top. And so what you would do, leave this guy at 0.5. Leave this guy's default at ×2, which brings it back to 1, right? Or even 3 might be stronger. Oh, no, I want to go the other way. 1. There we go. So if you do that, and then you create another exponent here, or another constant that we can use as an exponent, this guy, which I'll give him a value of 1, actually, give him a value of 0. That'll be the regular default that you see. And what we'll do is just make this a scalar parameter here and name this dust. Yeah, intensity. I was trying to figure out if there was a better name than dust. But if we do that, what happens with the instance, this guy. So this is currently the instance that's on the rocks I just made with you guys, right? This here. And what happens is that I now have a slider that I can use to turn it off or turn it back on again. Turn it back on again. So obviously you don't want to go too low with that. But you can actually adjust just how much dust is on top of things with this little slider. And then none, this guy too. All right, I can... At some point, yeah, this is just getting foolish now. I probably don't want to screw with that number. But yeah, so you can actually play around. And you can see it's inverted too. I probably don't want to go... I probably don't want to do it this way. I probably want to invert that number. But that'll give you, a way of controlling the cleanliness of these rocks. And so if you use this same material node setup on all of your assets, you can put a light hazing of dust on everything in your world. Each asset, if they use this in the master, has a little slider. You can adjust how much dirt is on top of it. So that will do a really good job of making everything feel cohesive and part of the same world, which will end up looking pretty decent. You can see here on these rocks now, they're looking a little too clean, right? And so if I grab that instance, I set this back to 1. That's clean. I'll go the other way. There. And so, yeah, you get a slight level of dust like that. And again, I can even go and put, this rippling normal map a little bit on top of these things too. So if I were to take that map that's being generated here, so this guy here is a mask, right? And if I was able to make another mask that's smaller than this, that's just the top of this, I essentially would do that by, again, using a power and going in and clamping this thing down. So if I go and create another power, and I plug this guy into the power, and we go and start previewing this power, I'll take an exponent here. Let's just make a constant 1. That is not doing anywhere near what I thought it would. Oh, yeah, because I'm doing things wrong. It's actually here that I want to make the power. So I plug this guy in here, start previewing this one. No, that's not right at all. It should actually be this. Taking the dot product of that, taking this, taking that. Now my brain's starting to hurt. But essentially, if you were able to make another one of these where you crop it off essentially from here upwards, we could put the ripples in the sand just on the upper portion of this, so it looks like the sand tapers off as it goes down. We could even, if we turn this into a tessellation material, by switching this on, we could tessellate the sand on top and actually have it rise up on top of the surface. So you end up with a little bit of growth on top of that thing. Cool. That's how you build that. No.